Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. So as you know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, consider cannabis, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. Since I'm an attorney, I have to say this as always, not legal advice. If you want more specific advice, feel free to reach out to me, but also reach out to our guest today, who is fascinating, and I've known her for a while, and I'm really excited to have her on. This is the first time she's doing this for us, so thank you. I do these video podcasts because they're a lot of fun, and I find myself learning something new every single time. But it would be nice to know if someone's listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. And if you are enjoying the conversation, you think someone else might enjoy it, please share. You can always find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. So what's today's podcast about? Our podcast, our live stream today is about medical affairs. We're going to talk about it not just at a U.S. level, but at a global level. So if you are in medical affairs, if you're trying to figure out and level set what is your organization doing versus what others could be doing, you care about today's discussion. Our guest today is the principal at ZS in charge of the Global Medical Affairs Consulting Practice. I'm really trying to go quickly so you don't have to hear the ambulance noise, but hopefully it goes quickly. But she is, like I said, the principal at ZS in charge of the Global Medical Affairs Consulting Practice, and I've known her for a while, and she's incredibly brilliant, incredibly charming. So you are in for a treat. Funny enough, we have friend Lynn saying hello. So. Hey, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Our guest for today, Sarah Jarvis. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Darshan. How are you?
Doing well. So, thank you for asking. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
how have you been in the chaos of COVID? Because I haven't had a chance to catch up with you.
I think like many people, just trying to get through. Really, really busy, I would say, from a work perspective, because medical affairs is growing by leaps and bounds at our clients. On a personal note, as I shared with you a little bit, it's been a really, really tough time. Unfortunately, a dear family member, even this week, was in the hospital again. Not with COVID, but one of those cases of delayed care due to COVID. Yeah. So I know tons of people are struggling. But I'm light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, I hope.
I feel like we keep saying that, though. We said that the last time, then the Delta variant came, and now we're sort of seeing the impact of that. But I'm already told, or at least when I read these articles, that it's there's something called the Lambda variant. And it's Lambda and Delta coming together, and there's like a new variant coming out of that. So let's see how that goes.
A horrible sorority fraternity. I don't really know, all the names, but it could be a really bad movie, I think.
But I have a question for you. You kind of hinted at this when you said this a second ago, which is you talked about how medical affairs functions are expanding and growing. That seems counterintuitive to me, because in the end, I've always thought that medical affairs, obviously there's a huge component that's based in it's not a field force, and then there's a field force itself. Are you seeing both components expanding, or are they just changing? Is there like a new remote MSL or medical affairs force coming out?
Okay, that was a lot of questions in there. Darshan, this reminds me of when we used to go to DIA and all those conferences and sit at the table and gather people around us and keep talking. But I think I personally have seen from COVID, right, the effects of COVID on the pharma medical device overall. There's just been a shift to medical. I would say it's pretty much at the expense of away from commercial.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Certainly in terms of interactions. But I think my personal take, and I guess I should have said I'm not a lawyer.
Yes.
and I'm not representing ZS, I'm representing myself here, but
I will add those disclaimers as well.
You can add all this. You even know how to do it correctly because you're a lawyer. But, I think the big difference here is in COVID, and this was a trend that we were seeing, you added, this is not legal advice. I love it. In COVID, there was a shift of, we still need our questions answered, right? And more people want reliable information at the source, trusted advice. And I think that's where medical is really stepping in, and I would say even stepping up. I mean, McKinsey talked about a couple of years ago, I think it was McKinsey who coined it. It was medical is the third pillar, right? So you have the development organization, you've got the commercial organization, and you've got medical affairs. And certainly what I've seen over the last year and a half plus at this point is, end of summer 2020, 80% of the companies we were talking to, which is at that point probably above 40, right, are back up to 80% access with KOLs and the physicians that they're interacting with. I don't have data on the commercial side, but it's way lower. And I mean, medical, from a field perspective, you're getting 30 minutes on average with top thought leaders. On the sales side, you're at, under 2 minutes on average, I think, in most cases. Very, very different types of interactions. But I think the biggest change, because you asked a lot of questions, so I'm following up here. But I think the big thing that's here to stay is not just the field piece, but the idea of customer engagement and medical education and all of that actually becoming even more of a self-service. So from a content creation standpoint, so the folks who are internal in medical affairs, figuring out how to digitally engage with whomever their customers might be. And, my own personal bias is that it's not just the top KOLs, right? That there's a huge diverse group of stakeholders, external, who would benefit from some type of engagement, whether it's self-service through content or through the field medical channels, that they would benefit from that.
There's so many questions. I just kept taking notes. My first question to start off with, I'm afraid to ask because each one of them just goes down a different rabbit hole. But let's start with the first one. Pick something. Who to engage with. And you talked about how you're moving away from the top KOLs. That's an interesting statement to me.
I wouldn't say away.
Oh, in addition to, maybe that's a better way.
It is, I wish I had a whiteboard behind me, but I miss my whiteboards. You've got a pyramid, right? National, regional, local. That pyramid is, first it's going down, or that triangle's going down. So there are lots more local opinion leaders. And then there's also this idea of actually turning it on its side and seeing a whole pyramid. So you've got, in the US, payers, you've got IDN leadership, you've got, of course, nurses and other healthcare professionals, you've got digital online influencers, you've got a whole host of different, I'll use the word customer in print, in quotation marks, but customer groups that medical is potentially engaging with.
So this, again, as always, so many questions, each rabbit hole. Okay. The thing you mentioned is going after specific audiences. You talked about payers, IDNs, nurses, digital influencers. Let's start with the first one. Digital influencers. That's a very potentially problematic area to get into, because are you still in medical affairs if you're doing it almost as marketing? How do you find, I'm not talking about specific companies and I'm not talking about how ZS does it, but how do you find companies in general identify these influencers, and what do you find their goal to be?
All right, lots of questions again. I actually have some data. So we just, I think yesterday, we haven't gotten it out yet, but we just published our 2021 Outlook report for medical affairs. And I wrote it down actually because I wanted to share this. It's 1/3 of the over 100 people we talk to in the industry are tracking digital online influencers. It's 34
through the medical affairs function.
They're tracking them. And I think most companies are still figuring out how to engage them, but they're at least tracking them now. So what does that mean? So a digital online influencer, and I can see, Darshan, I understand the question of it's a little scary to talk to these folks, right? Like, and I really don't think we're talking about like the Kim Kardashians of the world who are just, wildly texting, things without clearly not paying attention to the guidance that
I'm sure so not touching that.
Don't touch that one. But I think the way I look at it is, I am related to a lot of folks who read misinformation online all the time, right? If you have digital influencers, maybe they're part of a patient advocacy group, maybe they are junior thought leaders who are at ASCO and have 15,000 followers. What if they don't understand and people are following them? You need to engage them in a productive and appropriate way. Like, this is not marketing. This is making sure that people with really loud voices aren't out saying things that don't make sense. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So I want to ask a follow-up, but Lynn has reached out. So here's the question.
Oh, yeah.
So is a thought leader still the correct term, or do we need a new designation?
Customers. I love it, Lynn. I think we need a new designation. I think thought leader can be a portion of the overarching group that medical affairs is engaging with. What I would love to see is also just a blurring and forever getting rid of this notion of field medical engagement and other engagement, and just having that, having a single group that's focused on how to do that best.
Why?
Because I think the lines are blurring. Darshan, you've texted me, right? We've talked on the phone. We've even eaten together at conferences many years ago, right? At this point, it doesn't matter how we interact.
Yeah.
I've watched some of your podcasts.
Yeah.
Right. And that's engagement too.
So, but there's a difference, right? Because if you're engaging in person, it's a very different feel to the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Connection.
Totally.
So the rules are different. Would you agree or disagree? And if so, do you think that combining them, people will say, well, that's just not my job. I don't know why I'm here in this meeting, because that's just not what I do.
You're right. Sorry, I misspoke. I'm not talking about combining the jobs. I'm talking about making sure that those groups are not siloed anymore. I think they should be. I think MedInfo, Field Medical would do well to have a single lead, for example. Maybe even pulling in potentially the med ed programs that are digital and somehow engaging.
By the way, Lynn did say I agree. So
nice.
So let me ask you this other question, which is, you talked about these other stakeholders, and you talked about nurses. I obviously have bias, and that bias being pharmacy. So I'm going to ask you about that bias, because I just spoke to a individual in sales, and it's a large company, and they basically came out and said that, well, they didn't come out and say, but she was telling me in an informal conversation that they're engaging more and more with pharmacists. My experience as a pharmacist is very different from that. And again, my experience is going back and maybe a little bit more dated, but the fact is that in the hospital, for sure, we rarely, if ever, saw either MSLs or commercial people. And when I was in retail, I just never saw them. So my question is, are you seeing a pivot? If so, what's causing the pivot?
Yes. And I would say that is probably dated, certainly from an MSL perspective for certain teams. Okay. I mean, it depends, right? If the pharmacist is a key stakeholder in the decision-making, it makes sense to make sure that they have access to information and I really view what medical affairs is doing is making sure that all the key decision makers have access where they have questions, right? It is strictly non-promotional. So for anybody dialing in who isn't familiar with medical affairs, it is a non-promotional role. But they have a key, I view it as like a mantle. I saw an article one time with a Superman. I know you like you've got Batman in the background, right? You've got your cape on, and you've got this huge challenge to make sure that people know you're there and can ask questions and be confident that you will give accurate, non-misleading, non-promotional information back, right? And so, yes, to pharmacists, that's already a trend that's happening. I didn't mention them, but that's only because I didn't mention all the different roles.
Of course.
And then I think, oh goodness, you asked me another question, Darshan, and I've forgotten.
That's okay. I ask compound questions. I don't expect all of them. We're close. As long as we get close and we're in the ballpark, that's good enough. Because I don't remember what I asked either.
Okay.
But I'm going to challenge you there. Because I recognize that my experience could be dated, but I spoke to a couple of different pharmacists, and the most common response I get is, "What is medical affairs?" or "What are MSLs?" I don't know what the distinction is. When I explain it, and this is coming from someone who's actually applying for a job as an MSL, and she was like, "I don't really want to go into industry." I was like, "Why is that?" "Well, I really want to use my clinical knowledge." "Well, be in medical affairs, go become an MSL." "Well, is that basically like sales?" And I was like, no, it's supposed to be non-commercial. And she goes, "Yeah, but really?" I was like, no, there's no wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I guess my question is, if she didn't even know what that role was.
Yep.
And you have to explain that. Obviously, that penetration hasn't been happening as well as industry things.
Fair. I think it's a very fair critique. I've thought for years about, leaving ZS and going and starting a MSL training program. I never did it. I'm never going to do it. But, those do exist, I think there's a place for them. And one of the things we've been doing, and it's a teeny tiny way, but I think pharma and medtech, biotech, all could get more involved in this. We've actually done a pharma overview, what is medical affairs 101, with a couple of different pharmacy schools.
Oh, okay.
Just to explain, because I do think it's a huge avenue for many candidates, whether they have PharmDs or PhDs, MDs. Certainly in Europe, it's way more heavily MD focused.
So Lynn's saying, "I've personally seen more clinical PharmD engagement in the oncology space." I agree with that statement, actually. I feel like the oncology pharmacists get far more engagement. I would say everyone else doesn't. And that's just been an experience component.
I think that makes sense. If you look at the teams, the biggest teams out there, we did an analysis earlier this year. And I think I've talked to you about it before, Darshan. We've, and DIA does have student chapters. So that's good to know, Lynn. We should just invite Lynn in. I don't know if we can do that.
I know, right?
All right, next time we'll have that. Oh goodness, what was I saying? We've kept track of ratios. So you'll like this, Darshan. In 2014, the ratio of sales reps to MSLs was 10-1. Now, I'm going to admit I'm not great at ratio math, but it's now 8-1. What does that mean? It means there's a closer ratio. Yes. There are fewer sales reps out there for every MSL. But what we've seen, especially in areas like oncology, it can be 5-1.
Wow.
We've even seen 2-1.
Whoa. Okay.
Right. We're not talking the huge companies. In those cases, but we've worked with over 100 different companies in the past 3.5 years. So we've seen a lot of.
You're a small company just emerging, right? ZS is tiny.
Yeah. Me and my two people. No.
Exactly.
No, it's fun. We've gotten to see a lot of growth. It's been really cool.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, which is, we talk about engagement. We talk about this rep to pharmacist, sorry, rep to MSL ratio, if you will. Do you see a lot of the pharmacists now, and pharmacy schools sort of demonstrate that, so do medical schools, I believe PA schools as well, are now primarily, I'd say primarily women. I think they do. And a lot of my friends have kind of gone, I don't want to leave my job or anything like that. I want to still be a pharmacist, but I'd like to be able to have a better work-life balance. If that's true, do you think we're going to see more of a direction towards, you know what, you don't need to travel, but you need to be available to answer those calls? Like you and I communicated via texting, via emails, via all these other platforms. Do we see the MSL role evolving to address employee retention, but also engaging with people they want to engage with? And what I'm thinking about specifically is the idea that people don't like getting. I'm still confused by the fact that people don't like picking up the phone anymore. People are like, just text me and we'll figure it out from there.
That's the I don't know what the millennial difference is, but that's my break where I'm always like, guys, pick up the phone, call someone, have a conversation. Okay, again, Darshan, you asked a number of questions in under a minute. I will do my best.
Please.
So my personal bias, and this is probably because I've had 3 kids, right? I have been on maternity leave for almost a full year and a half of my working career. So with that in mind, and then I've worked part-time for many, many years. My bias a long time ago was that the especially field medical role could be taken in-house in parts of it, right? That on-call idea. Like that's a perfect potential role for somebody coming back from whatever leave. But that is clearly not taken off in big numbers, specific to that need that I think you were raising a little bit on the work-life balance piece. That said, I do have some data, and I'm going to look at it because I wrote it down
all the time. Yep.
So we interviewed over 200 KOLs. So typically the people now, and Lynn, to your point, it could be thought leaders, it could be a slightly broader base, but basically people who regularly interact with MSLs, which is typically, by the way, historically about 4 times a year because it was always in person. Interesting. We asked about 2021 for the rest of the year and for 2022 and beyond. Guess the percent of interactions that they think with MSLs will be virtual.
So I'm going with Jeopardy numbers.
Okay.
I'm allowed to get close to, but not go over. So,
okay.
Lynn, feel free to play along. My number is 6.
Wait, no. Sorry. Do percent of 100. What percent of 100
okay.
will be virtual, and the rest would be face to face?
70%.
Ooh, you overshot it a little bit.
Damn it.
No, it's about 50%.
Oh, okay.
KOLs
That's pretty significant.
About 50% face to face. I'm getting some of the numbers a little bit off, but it's around there.
I just want to inform you I wasn't off.
All right. You know what? Maybe the KOLs are wrong, you guys. Now, interestingly, what you both pointed out, we asked industry personnel as well, what percent would be face-to-face versus virtual. What's interesting is it was actually the inverse of what you guys said. People, and I think this is a bit wishful thinking, they're hoping to get back to face-to-face more than the KOL.
Industry wants to. I understand industry wanting that. I just don't see it happening.
Well, I'm sorry. The people who answered it are the leadership, not the MSLs.
Right. That makes sense.
That makes sense. But what I think is interesting is there is agreement. Essentially, we had really high. Oh, Lynn, I have bad news. And so she has a new team. So what I was going to say is we also asked about comfortability, and pretty much everybody's comfortable except when they have a new team and they don't have relationships. And that's where, it's essentially we asked what's the hardest part of virtual, and it was 86% said when it's a new team that don't have established relationships.
It's building
and that's
those relationships.
really hard to do virtually. That said, I think people are getting better at it. We asked about investments and tons of money going into upskilling of field teams to make sure that they're comfortable with virtual, because it's here to stay for sure.
As you know, Sarah, this is supposed to be a 15 to 20 minute conversation.
Oh, we're over.
We're over because you are that interesting. Because
Darshan, it's like when we're at conferences and we would sit at a table and go, oh, we have to leave.
It's exactly that. I get to have fun conversations. This is the best part of doing these podcasts.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions.
Oh yeah, 4 questions.
Before we go there, by the way, let's tell everyone where they can reach you.
Yep.
So at sarah.jarvis@zs.com.
Yep.
And what we should also point out, I'll just leave that up there actually. So as you know, I'm going to ask you 3 more questions.
Okay.
My first question is, based on what we discussed, what would you like to ask the audience?
I would love to, we talked about a lot, but I think the key in my mind is, what does that future look like? What are you doing or wanting to do that you have it to make sure you feel comfortable in the future with your team?
I take first crack at it if I can, just so you have some feedback. So my first, I would say that we're going to go towards remote, but I think remote's going to be actually a step in that direction. What I mean by that, I think, is I'm part of organizations, as are you, who are already talking about what does the step after that look like, and I'm thinking about some version of AI/machine learning that kicks in, answers the easier questions before you get moved to the MSL, who jumps in, follows up, and has those additional engagements. Because far too often I've been in situations as a clinician where you get the question at 9 o'clock at night, at 2 in the morning, and you're going, I can't reach anyone, but I still have a patient who needs this answer right now.
Yeah.
So having those answers handy in some format would be good. Right now, and I hate to admit this, but what you'll end up doing is just searching Google to go, has anyone seen this problem before? And what can I do? So having information from a quote unquote trusted source, because that's what clinicians do right now, quote unquote trusted to this industry. I think that's going to be a huge component. I think another component is going to be addressing the issue of trust. I think industry in general does some very good things, but we have bad players, and we have a responsibility to address those issues, both for MSLs, but in general for the industry itself as well. So I'd say those are the 2 big areas. So automation, machine learning, use of tools like Amazon's. I'm not going to use the word because she'll go off. And
or if any Midwestern person says my name,
right,
they're talking. Yeah,
exactly. I can say that because I don't have Apple, but Siri but you get the general idea. So I think that's going to be the next step. Do you see that happening, or do you think that?
Oh man, Darshan, that's another 30 minutes right there.
Let's talk about it later then. How about that?
Yeah. Let's set a time, because that one, I might need wine for that one.
I love it. Okay, so that was my first question. My second question. What was something you've learned in the last month that the audience might like hearing?
I have learned that taking a break is incredibly important. I took a break this week. This sounds bizarre. I took off Tuesday afternoon and all the way through to Thursday morning. My mother and I went on her belated birthday. We went to Carmel, California. It's beautiful. I couldn't ever live there because it's so picturesque, but it was just gorgeous. We took the time. I didn't work. We just focused on each other. It was so much fun.
Just to be clear, didn't work. Just so we can level set a little bit. There are different levels of didn't work. My level of didn't work is I will check my phone constantly just to see if anyone needs anything right now. I will try to ignore it, but I will pretend that I'm doing that. So did you actually check your phone, or did you actually put that away as well?
That's a fair question. There are times when I do not check my phone, but my teams know that in advance. I did not check my email.
That's pretty good.
Did check my phone for text messages because I remember being an associate at ZS 23 years ago and waiting for the principal to get back to you, which is terrible. So I only had 4 texts.
Good for you. There's the Showtime show that I always imagine your life must be like. I'll have to tell you. It's about this guy who's a principal consultant and what his life is like. I love the show, but I'll send you send you the link.
I don't have Showtime, I don't think so. But I will say, I don't know, ZS, I don't know what your views of consulting are, but we're all so nice to each other. That's my favorite part about ZS.
Oh, my view of consulting is it's extremely glamorous. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh. No.
I guess that's wrong.
Well, maybe, but not ZS.
Okay, fair enough. And the last question, what made you happy in the last week?
Oh, well, going out with my mom. That was incredibly good. No, I think the biggest thing was my middle child, Elizabeth, was able to go to camp, and she was so excited. Oh. And it's outdoors, and they all took COVID tests, and they wore their masks anytime they were indoors. And so my worry went down, and her joy was just palpable, which was awesome.
Okay. Well, that is awesome. Sarah, this was wonderful having you on. I hope we can have you on soon again.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, we've got our date with wine and AI.
Wine and AI. That should be the title, Wine and AI. I love it. And we should invite other guests like Lynn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think I could do it at 9 a.m. Pacific time if we actually.
It may indicate other problems, but fair enough. We'll talk soon. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye, Darshan.
Bye.